Hold on, Jet. I'm doing shit. Let's give this a go. Oh god, ads. Okay. How do I handle this? Okay. Y'all are not hearing things, that's okay. Oh my god, more ads? That teaches me to use a different browser. Alright, fuck off, please. Alright, here we go. We're almost there, chat. Oh wait, can you guys hear? Nope, you guys can't hear anything. Okay. Now you can hear. I'm an idiot. Okay, there we go. And for those of you who are wondering what you're listening to, it'd be this. We're just gonna do that. Online with a friend, not a problem. I, myself, am getting my shit together. Good. Alright. Welcome one and welcome all. We're going to be doing Completely Irish today. Absolutely Irish. In honor of good old St. Patrick's Day. I just need to get my shit in order, and we should be right on our way. But because this is, of course, Wolfie's channel, we most decidedly do not have our shit in order. Is anyone really surprised by these turns of events? I dare say not. Nevertheless, here we are. Alright, so let me get this all going. Here we go. We've got Celtic Tales from here. I'm just loading up all my PDFs. Fairy Tales. Yes, we'll do that as well. Do. Tales from Peasantry. haunted Ireland. How can you ever forget? Alright. Irish Ghost Tales. Oh no, that's the one that's not right. Ah, this one's not right. And of course... we'll put this there. Ah, right. So we've got 6 books completely devoted. Oh, fuck me. 7. I've got 7 books. And I'm going to go through them at random. And what will come of it will come of it. Alright. We would be absolutely remiss if we did not start off by talking about birds. You absolutely know this much. I mean, how can we have a stream without talking about birds? It's illegal. You can't be having it. It can't be. So, our first story will be Little White Thorn and the Talking Bird. Oh, bird fact. Now you've put me in a bind because I need to think of an Irish bird fact. And I don't know too much about Irish birds. I do know, however, that did you know that the wee little wren is a symbol of happiness and prosperity in Celtic lore. Also, the Celtic goddess Morrigan, who is a war goddess and one of the most powerful deities in Celtic lore, is symbolized by the hooded crow, which is a crow that looks like he's wearing a little white jacket. And they're very cute. They're quite adorable. I can actually show you. I can actually show you what a hooded crow looks like. Corvix cornix. And look at that wee little lad. He looks spiffy. He looks smart. Look at that fella. Look at those bright little eyes. They're found all over Europe, but they're found in Ireland. Ah. But this story does not yet specify what kind of bird we're dealing with, as you right might have guessed. Let me take a look at... Why will you not lower? Oh, because you're at the lowest setting already? Hi. Alright, so this is the story of the Little White Thorn and the Talking Bird, from Brittany. Long ago, in the oak trees used in building the oldest boat at Brest were but acorns, there lived a poor widow, whose name was Ninor. Her father had been of noble lineage, and had a large fortune. When he died, he left a manor house, a farm, a mill, and an oven, where all the villagers paid to bake their bread. He also left 12 horses, and twice as many oxen, 12 cows, and 10 times that number of sheep, without counting the corn and the fine linen. But as she was a widow, Ninor's brothers would not let her have her share of the inheritance. Peric, the eldest, kept the manor, the farm, and the horses. Fanche, the second, took the mill and the cows. The third brother, Rual, had the oxen, the great oven, and the sheep. So nothing was left for Ninor but an old ramshackle cottage on the heath where they usually sent sick animals. When Ninor was moving her bits of furniture to her poor cottage, Fanche pretended to be sorry for her. I'm going to behave to you as a brother and a Christian, he said. I have an old black cow which I have never been able to fatten, and which hardly gives enough milk to feed a newborn babe. But you may take her with you. Whitethorn can keep her on the heath. Whitethorn was the widow's daughter. She was nearly 11 years old, and was so pale that people called her by the name of the white hedge flower. So Ninor went away with her poor little pale daughter, pulling the cow along with a bit of rope. And when they reached the cottage, Ninor set the girl and the cow onto the heath together. Every day and all the day long, Whitethorn stayed there looking after Blackie the cow. She spent her time making crosses out of broom and daisies while she sang a melancholy air. And poor Blackie had a hard enough time finding a little grass between the stones. One day, Whitethorn noticed a bird perched on one of the flowery crosses she had just stuck in the ground. The bird was chirping and shaking its head. It looked at her as if he wanted to speak. The girl went nearer to the bird and listened carefully, but she could understand nothing. Still, Whitethorn was entranced with the little bird, and she watched it long. That night began to fall. She'd forgotten about Blackie. At last the bird flew away, and as Whitethorn followed him with her eyes, she saw that the stars were twinkling in the sky. Then she looked for Blackie, but could not find her. She called, she struck the tufts of broom with her stick. She went down into the hollows where the rainwater had formed little pools, but all in vain. Blackie was not to be found. At last the child heard her mother calling as if some misfortune had befallen. Frightened, Whitethorn hurried toward her, and at the entrance to the field, on the path leading to their cottage, she saw the widow kneeling near Blackie. The wolves from the forest had gotten her, and nothing was left of her but bones and horns. Whitethorn burst into tears and fell on her knees by her mother. At the sight of her daughter's grief, the widow tried to comfort her. "Do not weep for Blackie, as if she were a human being, my darling," she said. "Even though the wolves and bad Christians are against us, heaven will have pity on us. Come, help me pick some of the firewood and let's go home." Whitethorn did as her mother said, but the tears trickled down her pale, wan cheeks. "Oh, poor Blackie," she said to herself. "She was no trouble to lead about. She ate anything, and she was beginning to get fat." That evening, Whitethorn would eat no supper, and during the night she woke again and again, thinking that she heard Blackie lowing at the door. Finally, just before daybreak, she was convinced she heard the cow just outside in the field, and she ran out to the fields barefoot and in her petticoat. But Blackie was not there. The music is distracting the shit out of me. You're getting lowered. There we go. But Blackie was not there. As she came near the heath, however, she beheld the same bird that she had seen before, perched again on the cross of the broom. He was singing, and he seemed to be calling her. But she understood him no better than she had the day before. She was about to run home when she looked down, and saw what she thought was a gold coin lying at her feet. She tried to turn it over with her toe, but it was not a coin. It was the magic herb of gold, that you can see only at sunrise if you're barefoot and half-dressed, and if you see it, then the fairies will bestow upon you the gift of sight. And so it was. The moment she touched the herb, she understood the language of the birds. "Whitethorn, I want to do you a good turn," the bird was saying. "Whitethorn, listen to me." "Who are you?" asked Whitethorn, very much astonished that she could hear the bird. "I am Robin Redbreast," said the bird. And each year I am allowed to make a poor girl rich. And this time I've chosen you. Oh, Robin, Robin! Cried Whitethorn. Will I be rich enough to have a shining silver cross, with a shining silver chain to go about my neck, and a pair of wooden shoes for my feet as well? You shall have golden cross and silken shoes, answered the bird. And what must I do to have all that, little bird? Asked Whitethorn. You must follow me wherever I lead you, said the robin. I will do it, said Whitethorn. And so Robin Redbreast flew off, and Whitethorn went running after him. She followed him across fields and through the woods until they came to the dunes just opposite the 7 Isles. There the bird stopped. Can you see anything below on the beach? Asked the robin. Yes, said Whitethorn. I see a pair of wooden shoes and a wooden staff. Put all the shoes and take the staff, said Robin Redbreast. I will, said Whitethorn, running down to the beach. Now, directed Robin, you must walk on the sea till you reach the first island. Then you must go round it until you come to a rock all hidden beneath reeds that are the colour of the sea. And then what must I do? Asked the girl. You must gather the reeds and make a halter. Well, that'll be easy enough, said Whitethorn. And then, with your wooden staff, you must strike the rock as hard as you can until it cracks open. Alright, I guess this bird has turned into the chicken from Hotline Miami. I'm cool with that. That did not seem so easy, but Whitethorn did as she was told and carried out all the bird's instructions. With the magic shoe she walked on the sea to the first island. She went round it till she came to the rock with the sea green reeds. With these she made a halter, as the bird directed. Then, with her wooden staff, she struck the rock as hard as she could. Instantly it cracked open like an egg, and out of it clambered a cow with skin as smooth as a maiden's cheek, and eyes as soft as the light of dawn. She was very gentle, and Whitethorn, delighted, put the halter on her and led her over the water, then through the woods, then over the fields and across the heath until they reached the widow's cottage. When Ninor saw the cow, she was happy as she had been sad before, but she was happier still when she milked the cow. The milk flowed like the water of a spring. Ninor filled all her pots and pans, and she filled her wooden bowls, and her crocks and her churns, yet still the milk flowed on. It seemed as though the beautiful sea cow, for that is what the talking bird had named her, had milk for all the babes in Brittany. Soon everyone was gossiping about the widow's cow, and people came from far and near to look upon her. The richest farmers offered to buy a sea cow, and each offered a higher price than the others. At last Peric came and said to his sister, If you're a Christian, you'll remember that I am your brother, and you'll let me have the first offer. Let me have sea cow, and in exchange I'll give you 9 of my own cows. Sea cow is not worth 9 cows, answered the widow Ninor. She is worth all the cows that are grazing in the highlands and the lowlands. Thanks to her, I shall be able to sell milk in all the marketplaces from Dinan to Carhikes. Ah, very well, said Peric. Give her to me, sister, and I'll give you our father's farm, where you were born, with all the fields and ploughs and horses belonging to it. Ninor accepted Peric's offer, so they went all to the farm, and after Ninor had dug up a clump of earth in each field, drank a cup of water from the well, lighted a fire on the hearth, and cuffed a tuft of hair from each of the horses' tails to prove that she'd become the owner of all these things, she gave Sea Cow to her brother Peric. And Peric led the cow away to a house he had in a little quarter of that country. Little Whitethorn cried when she saw her dear Sea Cow led away, and she was sad all that day. When night fell, she went into the stable to put hay in the mangers. The horses all seemed to look at her with sympathy. Alas, she sighed, why is Sea Cow not here too? Hardly had she spoken, she heard a gentle lowing, and stepped on a golden herb, and knew the language of the animals. She understood these words.
Little mistress, here I am again.
Very astonished, Whitethorn turned quickly, Right behind her stood Sea Cow. "Oh, Sea Cow!" cried the girl. Who brought you here?"
I do not belong to your wicked Uncle Peric, said Sea Cow, because I cannot belong to anyone.
"But then," said Little Whitethorn, "my mother will have to give back the farmhouse, the fields, and the horses."
Not at all,
answered Sea Cow.
for they was hers by right. Your brother took them all unjustly when your grandfather died.
"But my Uncle Peric will come look for you here," said Whitethorn.
I will tell you what to do,
Sea Cow said.
First, go and pick 3 verbena leaves.
Whitethorn ran off and quickly returned with the 3 verbena leaves.
Now,
said Sea Cow,
rub me with those leaves from my ears to my tail, and whisper softly 3 times, Saint Ronan of Hibernia, Saint Ronan of Hibernia, Saint Ronan of Hibernia.
Whitethorn did as she was told, and as she whispered for the 3rd time, Sea Cow was transformed into a horse. The girl was wonderstruck.
Now,
said the horse,
your Uncle Peric will not know me. My name is no longer Sea Cow, but Sea Horse.
When the widow heard what had happened, she was delighted. The very next day she hastened to try her new fine horse. She loaded her back with corn to take to the market, and you can imagine her surprise when she saw Sea Horse's back growing longer and longer the more she piled on sacks of corn, so that she alone could carry as many sacks as all the horses in the parish put together. You may be sure that the news of it soon spread abroad. When Ninor's brother Fanshawe heard about it, he came to the farm and asked his sister if she would sell him the horse. She refused until he proposed to give her in exchange the mill and all the pigs he was fattening. So the bargain was struck, and Ninor took possession of the mill, as she had of the farm, and then let her brother lead Sea Horse away. The very next evening, the horse was home again, and again Whitethorn picked 3 verbena leaves and rubbed her from the ears to the tail, repeating the words, Saint Ronan of Hibernia 3 times. No sooner had she done so than the horse changed into a sheep. Instead of white wool, she was covered with scarlet wool, as long as hemp and as soft as flax. Sea Horse was now Sea Lamb. Whitethorn was delighted and called her mother, who came into the stable to admire this new miracle. "Ah, go fetch the shepherd's shears," she said to Whitethorn. "The poor dear beast is weighed down with such heavy fleece." When she tried to shear Sea Lamb, the wool grew again as fast as she cut it off, so that the sheep alone was worth all the flocks in the mountains. Now Ninor's 3rd brother, Rewal, happened to be passing by, and he saw what was happening. He at once offered to exchange his oxen, his heaths, and all his sheep for Sea Lamb. So the widow gave Rewal to the sheep, but as he was leading Sea Lamb away along the shore, suddenly she threw herself into the waves. She swam to the smallest of the 7 isles. The rock opened to let her pass and closed again, and she was gone. This time Whitethorn waited in vain for her to come home. She came back neither that day, nor the next, nor ever again. So the girl ran off to the hawthorn bush to look for the talking bird, and there he was, singing away as before. "I was expecting you," said the talking bird. "Sea Lamb has gone, and will never return. Your wicked uncles are punished as they deserved, and now you are an heiress. You're rich enough to wear a golden cross and a silken shoes, as I promised you. Now my work is done, and I shall fly away. Always remember that you were once poor, and it was a little wild bird that made you rich." And so the talking bird spread his wings and flew away. Whitethorn never saw him again, but out of gratitude, she was always kind to animals, especially to wild birds, and she always gave to the poor. Okay, that was sweet. That was such a sweet little story. Gotta love birds, man. The next one is from the same book. It's called The Soul Cages. And this one's from just Ireland. Oh, Brittany! Oh, that was in Britain! Oh, I'm an idiot. Well, we'll pretend it's from Ireland. Especially the talking ones. Oh, for sure. Alright, we'll pretend that one was Irish. I don't know why I assumed. Alright. Here goes. Daughtry? Daughtry. Jack Daughtry lived in a remote little cottage by Dunbeg Bay, on the coast of County Clare. Jack was a fisherman. Oh, hell yeah, my kind of person. And his father and grandfather before him had been. He lived in just the same spot as them, and like them, lived alone except for his wife. People used to wonder why the Daughtry family was so fond of that wild sight, so far away from all humankind. I mean, if it were so far away from humankind, I'd be fond of it as well. And in the midst of huge shattered rocks with nothing but the wide ocean to look upon. But they had their own good reasons for it. The place was just about the only spot on the part of the coast where anyone could well live. There was a neat little creek where a boat might lie as snug as puffin in her nest, and out of this creek a ledge of sunken rocks ran into the sea. Now when the Atlantic was raging with a storm, and a good westerly wind was a-blowing strong on the coast, many a richly laden ship went to pieces on those rocks. And then the fine bales of cotton, tobacco, and such things, and the pipes of wine, and the puncheons of rum, and the casks of brandy, and the kegs of Hollands were all swept neatly ashore. So, Dunbeg Bay was just a little estate to the Dohertys. Not that they weren't kind and humane to a distressed sailor, if everyone had the luck to get to land. Many a time indeed did Jack put out his little boat and lend a hand toward bringing the crew from a wreck. But when the ship had gone to pieces and the crew were all lost, we'd blame Jack for picking up all he could find. "And who's the worse of it?" said he. "For as to the king, God bless him, everyone knows he's rich enough already without getting what's floating in the sea." Jack, though such a hermit, was a good-natured, jolly fella. No other, for sure, could have ever coaxed Biddy Mahoney to quit her father's snug and warm house in the middle of the town of Ennis, and to go so many miles off to live upon the rocks with the seals and seagulls for next-door neighbours. But Biddy knew that Jack was the man for the woman who wished to be comfortable and happy, for, to say nothing of the fish, Jack had the supplying of half the gentlemen's houses in the country with the wrecks that came to the bay. And she was right in her choice, for no woman ate, drank, or slept better, or made a prouder appearance at chapel on Sundays than Mrs. Daughtry. Many a strange sight did Jack see on that lonely bit of coast, and many a strange sound did he hear, but nothing daunted him. So far he was from being afraid of merrows, or other such magical beings that dwelled upon the sea, that the very first wish of his heart was to meet one of them. Jack had heard the luck had always come out of an acquaintance with the merrows. Therefore, whenever he dimly discerned them moving along the face of the water in their robes of mist, he made directly toward him, but he never could catch up, and many a scolding did Biddy bestow upon Jack for spending his whole day out at sea, bringing home no fish. Little did poor Biddy know the fish that Jack was after. 'Twas rather annoying to Jack that, though living in a place where merrows were as plenty as lobsters, he could never get the right view of one. What vexed him more was that both his father and his grandfather had often seen him. He even remembered hearing when he was a child how his grandfather, who was the first in the family that had settled down at the creek, had been good friends with a merrow. This, however, Jack did not well know how to believe. Fortunate length, began to think it only right that Jack should know as much of his father and his grandfather did. Accordingly, one day when he had strolled a little farther than the usual along the coast, and was coming round to the point of a rock, he saw something like to nothing he had ever seen before. 'Twas perched on a rock at a little distance out to sea, but as well as he could discern at that distance, it looked green, and in the body, green in the body, and held, he would have sworn, a cocked hat in his hand. Jack stood for a good half hour, straining his eyes and wondering at it, and all the time the thing did not stir hand or foot. At last Jack's patience was quite worn out, and he gave a loud whistle and a hail. But the Merrow, for that is what it was, started up, put the cocked hat on its head, and dived down head first from the rock. After that day, Jack's curiosity was excited, and he constantly directed his steps toward the point. But he could never get a glimpse of the sea gentleman with the cocked hat, and, with thinking and thinking about the matter, he began at least to fancy that he'd only been dreaming. One very rough day, however, and the sea was running mountains high, Jack determined to give a look at the Merrow's rock, for he'd always chosen a fine day before. And then he saw the strange thing cutting capers upon the top of the rock, and diving down, and coming up and diving down again. Jack had now only to choose a good blowing day, and he could see the man of the sea as often as he pleased. All this, however, did not satisfy him. He wished now to get acquainted with the Merrow. Then one tremendous blustering day, before he got to the point whence he had a view of the Merrow's rock, the storm came on so furiously that Jack was obliged to take shelter in one of the caves which are so numerous along the coast. And there, to his astonishment, he saw sitting before him a thing with green hair, long green teeth, red nose, and a pig's eyes. It had a fish's tail, legs with scales on them, and short arms like fins. It wore no clothes, but had the cocked hat under its arm, and seemed to be thinking very seriously about something. Jack, with all his courage, was a little daunted, but now or never, he thought. So he went boldly up to the cogitating fishman, took off his hat, and made his best bow. "Your servant, sir," said Jack. "Your servant kindly, Jack Doherty," said the Merrow. "To be sure, then. How well your honour knows my name," said Jack. "It is I. Is it I not know your name, Jack Doherty? Why, man, I knew your grandfather long before he was married to Judy Reagan, your grandmother. Ah, Jack, I was fond of that grandfather of yours. He was a mighty worthy man. I never met his match above or below, before or since, for sucking in a shell full of brandy. I hope, my boy," said the old fellow, with a merry twinkle in his eyes, "I hope you're his own grandson." "Ah, never fear me for that," said Jack. If my mother had only reared me on brandy, 'tis myself would be a sucking infant to this hour. I'm assuming he's like, yeah, that was my grandfather. "Well, I like to hear you talk so manly. You and I must be better acquainted, if only for your grandfather's sake." "I'm sure," said Jack, "since your honour lives down under the water, you must be obliged to drink a power to keep any heating you in such a cruel, damp, cold place. Well, I've often heard of men drinking like fishes, and might I be so bold as to ask where you get the spirits?" "Well, where do you get them yourself, Jack?" said the Merrow, twitching his red nose between his forefinger and his thumb. "Ah, now I see how it is," said Jack. "But I suppose, sir, your honour has got a fine dry cellar below to keep 'em in." "Ah, let me alone for the cellar," said the Merrow with a knowing wink. "I'm sure," continued Jack, "it must be mighty well worth looking at." "Ah, you may say that, Jack," said the Merrow. "And if you meet me here next Monday, just at this time of the day, we'll have a little more talk with one another about the matter." Jack and the Merrow parted, the best of friends in the world. On Monday they met, and Jack was not a little surprised to see the Merrow had 2 cocked hats with him, one under each arm. "Might I take the liberty to ask, sir," said Jack, "why your honour has brought 2 hats with you today?" You would not sure be gonna give me one of them to keep for the curiosity of the thing. Oh, no, no, Jack, said the Merrow. I don't get my hat so easily, to part with them that way. But I want you to come down and dine with me, and I've brought you the hat to dine with. Oh, Lord bless and preserve us, cried Jack in amazement. Would you want me to go down to the bottom of the salt sea ocean? Sure, I'd be smothered and choked up with the water, to say nothing of being drowned. And what would poor Biddy do for me? What would she say? And what matter what she says, you pinkeen? Who cares for Biddy's squalling? It's long before your grandfather would have talked that way. Many's the time he stuck the same hat on his head and dived down boldly after me. And many's the snug bit of dinner and good shellfish or brandy he had and I had together below under the water. Is that true, sir? Said Jack. Why then, here's neck or nothing. That's your grandfather all over, said the old fellow. So come along and do as I do. They both left the cave, walked into the sea, and swam a piece until they got to the rock. The Merrow climbed on top of it, and Jack followed him. On the far side, it was as straight as the wall of a house, and the sea beneath looked so deep that Jack was almost cowed. Now, Jack, said the Merrow, just put on this hat on your head, and mind to keep your eyes wide open. Take hold of my tail and follow after me, and you'll see what you see. In he dashed, and in dashed Jack boldly after him. Through the water they went, and Jack thought they'd never stop going. Many a time did he wish himself sitting at home by the fireside with Biddy. Yet, where was the use of wishing now, when he was so miles below the waves in the Atlantic? So he held hard to the Merrow's tail, slippery as it was, and at last, to Jack's great surprise, they got out of the water, and he actually found himself on dry land, at the bottom of the sea. They landed just in front of a nice house that was slated very neatly with oyster shells. Jack could hardly speak, what with wonder, and what with being out of breath after travelling so fast through the water. He looked about him, and he could see no living things except for crabs and lobsters, of which there were plenty walking leisurely about on the sand. Overhead, the sea was like a sky, and the fishes swimming like birds about in it. Why don't you speak, man? Said the Merrow. I dare say you had no notion that I had such a snug little concern here as this. Are you smothered or choked or drowned, or are you fretting after Biddy out? Well, come along, and we'll see what they've got for us to eat. Jack really was hungry, and it gave him no small pleasure to perceive a fine column of smoke rising from the chimney, announcing what was going on within. Into the house he followed with the Merrow, and there he saw a good kitchen, right well provided with everything. It was a noble dresser and plenty of pots and pans, with 2 young Merrows cooking. His host then led him into the dining room, which was furnished shabbily enough. There was not a table or chair in it, but only planks and logs of wood to sit on and eat off of. However, there was a good fire blazing upon the hearth. Comfortable sign to Jack. Come now, and I'll show you where I keep you know what, said the Merrow with a sly look. Opening a little door, he led Jack into a fine cellar, well filled with pipes, kegs, hogsheads, and barrels. What do you say to that, Jack Darty? Ah, maybe a body can live snug under the water. Ah, never the doubt of that, said Jack, with a smack of his lip. They went back to the dining room and found dinner laid. There was no tablecloth, to be sure, but what matter? Jack and Biddy did not always have one at home either. The dinner itself would have been no discredit to the finest house in the country. The choicest of fish, no wonder, were there. Turbot, sturgeon, soles, lobsters, oysters, and 20 other kinds were on the planks at once, along with plenty of the best foreign spirits. Wine, the old fellow said, was too cold for his stomach. Jack ate and drank until he could eat no more. Then, taking up a shell of brandy, he said, "Here's to your honour's good health, sir. Though, begging your pardon, it's mighty odd that as long as we've been acquainted I don't know your name yet." Ah, that's true, Jack, replied the Merrow. I never thought of it before, but it's better late than never. My name's Kumara. And a mighty decent name it is, cried Jack, taking another shellful. Here's to your good health, Kumara, and may you live those 50 years to come. 50 years, replied Kumara. I'm obliged to you indeed. If you'd said 500, it would have been something worth the wishing. Well, sir, said Jack, I suppose you'd live to a powerful age here under the water. You knew my grandfather, and he's dead and gone. Better than these 60 years. I'm sure it must be a healthy place to live in. No doubt of it. But come, Jack, keep the liquor stirring. Shell after shell did they empty, and to Jack's exceeding surprise, he found the drink never got into his head, owing he supposed to the sea being over them, which kept their noodles cool. Old Kumara got exceedingly comfortable and sung several songs, but Jack, if his life depended on it, could never remember more than this. Rum fum poodle boo, ripple dipple nitty knob, dum doo doodle coo, raffle tattle chittaboo. At length, Kumara said to Jack, Now, my dear boy, if you'll follow me, I'll show you my curiosities. He opened a little door, and led the way into a large room, where Jack saw many odds and ends that Kumara had picked up one time or another. What chiefly took his attention, however, were a great many things like lobster pots, ranged on the ground along the wall. Well, Jack, how do you like my curiosities? Said old Kumara. Upon my soul, said Jack, they're mighty well worth the looking at. But might I make so bold as to ask what these things like lobster pots are? Oh, the soul cages, is it? And the what, sir? These things here are that I keep the souls in. Ara, what souls, sir? Said Jack in amazement. Surely the fish have no souls in them. Oh no, replied Kumara quite coolly, that they have not. These are the souls of drowned sailors. Ah, the Lord preserve us from all harm, muttered Jack. How in the world did you get them? Easily enough. I've only, when I see a good storm coming on, to set a couple dozen of these. And then, when the sailors are drowned and the souls get out of them under the water, the poor things are almost perished to death, not being used to the cold. So they make into my pots for shelter, and then I have them snug and fetch them home and keep them here dry and warm. And it is not well for them poor souls to get into such good quarters. Jack was so thunderstruck that he did not know what to say, so he said nothing. He went back into the dining room and had a little more brandy, which was excellent. And then, as Jack knew it must be getting late, as Biddy might be uneasy, he stood up and said it might be time for him to be on the road. Just as you like, Jack, said Coo, but take another drink before you go. You've a cold journey before you. Jack knew better manners than to refuse the parting glass. I wonder, he said, will I be able to make it out my way home? What should ail you, said Coo, and I'll show you the way. Out they went before the house, and Kumara took one of the cocked hats and put it on Jack's head the wrong way, then lifted him up onto his shoulder, such that he might launch him up into the water. Now, he said, giving him a heave, we'll come up just in the same spot you came down in. And Jack, mind and throw me back the hat. He canted Jack off his shoulder, and up he shot like a bubble through the water, until he came to the very rock he jumped off of, where he found as a landing place. Then he threw the hat in the water, and it sank like a stone. The sun was just going down in the beautiful sky of a calm summer's evening. A solitary star was dimly twinkling in the cloudless heaven, and the waves of the Atlantic flashed in a golden flood of light. So Jack, perceiving it was late, set off home. But when he got there, not a word did he say to Biddy of where he went and spend the day. The state of the poor souls cooped up in the lobster pots gave Jack a great deal of trouble, and determining how to release them cost him a great deal of thought. At first, he had a mind to speak to the priest about the matter. What could the priest do? And what did Coo care for the priest? Besides, Coo was a good sort of an old fellow, and did not think he was doing any harm. It might not also be much to Jack's own credit if he had known that he were to. It might also not be much to Jack's own credit if he were known that he used to go dine with Merrows. On the whole, he thought it was his best plan would be ask Coo to dinner, make him drunk if he was able, and then take the hat and go down and turn up all the pots releasing the souls. First of all, however, it was necessary to get Biddy out of the way, for Jack wished to keep the thing a secret from her. Accordingly, Jack grew mighty pious all of a sudden, and said to Biddy that he thought it would be good for both for their souls if she were to visit St. John's Well. Biddy thought so too, and off she set, one fine morning at dawn, giving Jack a strict charge to keep an eye on the house. As soon as she was gone, away went Jack to the coast, to give the appointed signal to Kamara, which was throwing a big stone into the water. Jack threw, and up sprang Kamara. "Oh, good morning, Jack," said he. "What do you want with me?" "Ah, nothing at all, sir," replied Jack, "except for you to come and take a bit of dinner with me, if I might make so free as to ask you." "It's quite agreeable, Jack, I assure you. What's your hour?" "At any time that's most convenient to you, sir. Say 1 o'clock, that you may go home with the daylight." "I'll be with you then," said Coo. "Never fear me." Jack went home and dressed a noble fish dinner, and got plenty of his best foreign spirits, enough for that matter to make 20 men drunk. Just as the clock struck 1, in came Coo with his cricked hat under his arm. Dinner was ready, and they sat down and ate and drank away manfully. Jack, thinking of the poor souls below in the pots, plied old Coo well with brandy, and encouraged him to sing, hoping to put him under the table. But poor Jack forgot that he had not the sea over his own head to keep it cool. The brandy got into it and did his business for him, and Coo left his host as dumb as a haddock on a Good Friday. Jack never woke until the next morning, and then he was in a sad way. "Ah, 'tis no use for me to try to make the old Coo drunk," said Jack. "How in this world can I help the poor souls out of the lobster pots?" But after ruminating nearly the whole day, he was struck by an idea. "Ah, I have it," he said, slapping his knee. "I'll be sworn that Coo never saw a drop of potin, as old as he is, and that's the thing to settle him. Is it not well that Biddy would not be home these 2 days yet? I can have another twist at him." So Jack asked Coo again, and Coo laughed at him for having no better head, telling him he'd never live up to his grandfather. "Well, try me again," said Jack, "and I'll drink you drunk and sober, and drunk again." "Anything in my power," said Coo, "to oblige you." At this dinner, Jack took care to have his own liquor well watered, and to give the strongest brandy he had to Coo. At last he said, "Pray, sir, did you ever drink any protein?" "No," said Coo. "What's that, and where does it come from?" "Oh, that's a secret," said Jack, "but it's the right stuff. Never believe me again if it's not 50 times as good as brand or rum either. Biddy's brother just sent me a present of a little drop in exchange for some brandy. Yeah, and you're an old friend of the family. I kept it to treat you with." "Well, let's see what sort of thing it is," said Kamara. The poteen was the right sort. 'Twas first rate, and had the real smack upon it. Coo was delighted. He drank and sang Rum Fum Boodle Boo over and over again, and he laughed and danced until he fell on the floor fast asleep. Then Jack, who had taken good care to keep himself sober, snapped up the cocked hat, ran off into the rock, leaped in, and soon arrived at Coo's house. All was still as the churchyard at midnight. Not a Merrow, young or old, was there. So in went Jack and turned up the pots, but he saw nothing emerge from them. Only heard a sort of little whistle or chirp as he raised each of them. At this he was surprised, until he recollected what the priest had often said. Nobody living could see the soul, no more than they could see the winter air. Having now done all he could do for the sailors' souls, he set the pots just as they were before, and sent a blessing after the poor souls to speed them on their journey wherever they were going. Jack now began to think of returning, but he put the hat on the wrong way. When he got outside, he found the water so high over his head that he had no hope of ever getting into it, now that old Kumara was not there to give him a lift. He walked about looking for a ladder, but not one could he find, nor was there a rock in sight. At last he saw a spot where the sea hung rather lower than anywhere else, so he resolved to try there. Just as he came into the spot, the big cod happened to put down his tail. Jack made him jump and caught hold of it, and the cod, in all amazement, gave a bounce and pulled Jack up. The minute the hat touched the water, Jack was whisked away and shot up like a cork, dragging the poor cod, which he forgot to let go of. He got to the rock in no time, and without a moment's delay hurried home, rejoicing in the good deed he's done. But meanwhile there was fine work at home, for Jack had hardly left the house on his soul-freeing expedition when Biddy came back from her soul-saving trip to the well. When she entered the house, she saw things lying higgledy-piggledy on the table before her. "Ah, here's a pretty job," she said. "That blackguard husband of mine, would you look I ever had to marry him, has picked up some vagabond or some. I was praying for the good of his soul, and they've been drinking all the poteen that my own brother gave him and all the spirits that he were to have sold." Then, hearing an outlandish kind of grunt, she looked down and saw Kumara lying under the table. "Ah, the Blessed Virgin help me," she shouted, "if he's not made a real beast of himself. Well, I've often heard of a man making a beast of himself with drink. Oh, Jack, what will ever he do with you? Or what will I do without you? How can any decent woman ever think of living with a beast?" With such lamentations, Biddy rushed out of the house and was going she knew not where, when she heard the well-known voice of Jack singing a merry tune. She was glad enough to find him safe and sound, and not turned into a thing that was neither fish nor flesh. Then Jack was obliged to tell her, and Biddy, though she had half a mind to be angry with him for not telling her before, admitted that he'd done a great service to the poor souls. Back they both went into the house, and Jack wakened up Kumara, perceiving the old fellow to be rather dull. He bid him not to be cast down, for 'twas many a good man's case. It all came to his not being used to the poteen. Jack recommended to him, by way of cure, to swallow a hare a dog that bit him, who, however, seemed to think he had had quite enough. He got up quite out of sorts, and without having the manners to say one word in the way of civility, sneaked off to cool himself by a jaunt through the salt water. Kumara never missed the souls. He and Jack continued to be the best of friends in the world, and no one perhaps ever equaled Jack for freeing souls from purgatory, for he contrived 50 excuses for getting into the house below the sea, unknown to the old fellow, and turning up the pots and letting out the souls. It vexed him, to be sure, that he could never see them, but as he knew the thing to be impossible, he was obliged to be satisfied. Their friendship continued several years. However, one morning when Jack threw a stone in the water as usual, he got no answer. He flung another and another. There was no reply. He went and returned the following morning, but it was to no avail. As he was without the hat, he could not come down into the sea and see what had become of old Ku. But his belief was that the old man, or the old fish, whoever he was, had either died at last or moved away from that part of the country. And that's the story. Let's see. Oh my god. This story is called Battle of the Birds. Alright, we'll start with Battle of the Birds. Oh, it's about a wren! Alright, buckle your seatbelts. This ought to be a good one. I will tell you a story about the wren. There was once a farmer who was seeking a servant, and the wren met him and said, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking a servant," said the farmer to the wren. "Will you take me?" said the wren. You poor creature. What good would you do?" "Oh, try me," said the wren. So he engaged him, and the first work he set him to do was thresh in the barn. The wren threshed. What did he thresh with? Why, a flail, to be sure, and knocked off one of the grain. The mouse came out, and she eats that. "I'll trouble you not to do that again," said the wren. He struck again, and he struck off 2 grains. Out came the mouse, and she eats them. So they arranged a contest to see who is strongest, and the wren brings his 12 birds, and the mouse her tribe. "You have your tribe with you," said the wren. "As well yourself." Oh, sorry, hold on. I know what to do with this. "As well yourself," said the mouse, and she struck out her leg proudly, but the wren broke it with his flail. And there was a pitched battle on a set day. When every creature and bird was gathering to battle, the son of the king at Tethertown said he would go see the battle, and that he would bring sure word home to his father the king, who would be the king of creatures this year. The battle was over before he arrived, all but one fight, between a great black raven and a snake. The snake was twined about the raven's neck, and the raven held the snake's throat in his beak, and it seemed that the snake would get the victory over the raven. When the king's son saw this, he helped the raven, and with one blow takes the head off the snake. When the raven had taken breath, and saw the snake was dead, he said, "Ah, for thy kindness to me this day, I'll give thee a sight. Come up now on the root of my 2 wings." The king's son put his hands on the raven before his wings, and before he stopped, he took him over 9 bens, and 9 glens, and 9 mountain moors. "Now," said the raven, "see you that house yonder? Go now to it. It is a sister of mine that makes her dwelling in it, and I will go bail that you are welcome. And if she asks you, were you at the Battle of the Birds, you say you were. And if she asks, did you see anyone like me, you say you did, but be sure that you meet me tomorrow morning here, in this place." The king's son got good and right good treatment that night. Meat of each meat, drink of each drink, warm water to his feet, and a soft bed for his limbs. On the next day, the raven gave him the same sight over 6 bens, and 6 glens, and 6 mountain moors. They saw a bothy far off. Though far off, they were soon there. He got good treatment this night, as before, plenty of meat and drink, and warm water to his feet, and a soft bed to his limbs. And on the next day, 'twas the same thing, over 3 bens, and 3 glens, and 3 mountain moors. Oh, they're decreasing by 3s. Interesting. On the 3rd morning, instead of seeing the raven at the other times, who should meet him but the handsomest lad he ever saw, with gold rings in his hair, with a bundle in his hand. The king's son asked this lad if he'd seen the big black raven. Said the lad to him, "Ah, you'll never see the raven again, for I'm not a raven. I was put under spells by a bad druid. 'Twas meeting you that loosed me, and for that you should get this bundle. Now," said the lad, "you must turn back on the self-same steps and lie a night in each house as before, but you must not lose the bundle which I gave you, till the place where you would most wish to dwell." The king's son turned his back to the lad and his face to his father's house, and he got lodging from the raven's sisters, just as he had when going forward. When he was nearing his father's house, he was going through close wood, It seemed to him the bundle was growing heavy, and he thought he would look what's in it. When he loosed the bundle, he was astonished. In a twinkling, he sees the very grandest place. Oh, did stream die? No, we're good. When he was near the... When he loosed the bundle, he was astonished. In a twinkling, he sees the very grandest place he ever saw. A great castle, and an orchard about the castle, which was every kind of fruit and herb. He stood full of wonder and regret for having loosed the bundle, for it was not in his power to put it back again. And he would have wished this pretty place to be in the pretty little green hollow that was opposite his father's house. But he looked up and saw a great giant coming toward him.
That's the place where you've built this house, King's son,
said the giant. Yes, but it's not here I would wish it to be, though it happens to be here by mishap, said the king's son.
What's the reward for putting it back in the bundle as it was before?
What's the reward, you'd ask? Said the king's son. That you'd give me the first son you have when he's 7 years of age. Oh, whoops.
That you would give me the first son you have when he's 7 years of age,
said the giant. Yeah, if I have a son, you shall have him, said the king's son. In a twinkling, the giant put each garden and orchard and castle back in the bundle as they were before.
Now,
says the giant,
take your own road and I will take mine.
But mind your promise.
And if you forget, I will remember.
The king's son took to the road, and at the end of a few days he reached the place he was fondest of. He loosed the bundle, and the castle was just as it was before. And when he opened the castle door, he sees the handsomest maiden he ever cast eye upon. Advance, king's son, said the pretty maid. Everything is in order for you, if you marry me this very day. It's I that am willing, said the king's son, and on the same day they married. They didn't know each other at all, but for some reason they thought this was a good idea. Hopefully it works out. But at the end of a day, in 7 years, who should see coming to the castle but a giant? The king's son was reminded of his promise to the giant. Until now he had not told the promise to the queen. Leave the matter between me and the giant, says the queen.
Turn out your son,
says the giant.
Mind your promise.
Ah, you shall have him, said the king, when his mother puts him in order for his journey. The queen dressed up the cook's son, and she gave him to the giant by hand. The giant went away with him, but he had not gone far when he put a rod in the hand of the little laddie. The giant asked him,
If thy father had that rod, what would he do with it?
If my father had that rod, he'd beat the dogs and cats so that they shouldn't be going near the king's meat, said the little laddie.
Thou'rt the cook's son,
said the giant. He catches him by the 2 small ankles and knocks him against the stone that was beside him. The giant turned back to the castle in a rage and madness and said if they did not send out the king's son to him, the highest stone of the castle would be the lowest. Said the queen to the king, We'll try it yet. The butler's son is of the same age as our son. Oh Jesus, they're gonna sacrifice all the little kids. She dressed up the butler's son, and she gives him to the giant by the hand. The giant had not gotten far when he put the rod in his hand.
If thy father had that rod, says the giant, what would he do with it?
He would beat the dogs and the cats, and they would be coming near the king's bottles and glasses.
Thou art the son of the butler,
says the giant, and dashed his brains out too. The giant returned in a very great rage and anger. The earth shook under the soles of his feet, and the castle shook, and all that was in it.
Out here with thy son, says the giant, or in a twinkling the stone that is highest in the dwelling will be the lowest.
So they had to give the king's son to the giant. And when they were gone, a little bit from the earth, the giant showed him the rod in his hand and said,
What would thy father do with this rod if he had it?
The king's son said, My father has a braver rod than that. And the giant asked him,
Where's thy father when he had that brave rod?
And the king's son said, He'll be sitting in his kingly chair. The giant understood that he had the right one. The giant took him to his own house and reared him as his own son. Oh, they did not have to sacrifice 2 kids for that. On a day of days, when the giant was home, the lad heard the sweetest music he'd ever heard at the room at the top of the giant's house. At a glance, he saw the finest face he'd ever seen. She beckoned him to come a bit nearer to her, and said her name was Auburn Mary, but told him to go this time, but be sure to be at the same place at about that dead of midnight. And he promised he did. The giant's daughter was at his side in a twinkling, and she said, Tomorrow you'll get the choice of my 2 sisters to marry, but they say you'll not take either but me. My father wants me to marry the son of the king of the Green City, but I don't like him. On the morrow the giant took out his 3 daughters, and he said,
Now, son of King of Tethertown, thou hast not lost by living with me so long. Thou wilt get a wife, one of the 2 of my eldest of daughters, and leave her to go home with her the day after the wedding.
If you give me this pretty little one, said the king's son, I'll take you at your word. The giant's wrath kindled, and he said, Before thou gett'st her, thou must do these 3 things that I ask thee to do. Oh, say on, said the king's son. The giant took him to a byre.
Now, says the giant, 100 cattle are stabled here, and it has not been cleaned for 7 years. I'm going home today, and if this byre is not cleaned before night comes, so clean that a golden apple will run from end to end of it, not only thou shalt not get my daughter, but 'tis only drink of thy fresh, goodly, beautiful blood that will quench my thirst this night.
He begins cleaning the byre, but he might just as well to do, keep bailing the great ocean. After midday, when the sweat was blinding him, the giant's youngest daughter came to where he was, and said, You're being punished, king's son. I am that, said the king's son. Come over, says Auburn Mary, and lay down your weariness. I will do that, he says, but there's death awaiting me at any rate. He sat down near her. He was so tired that he fell asleep beside her. When he woke, the giant's daughter was not to be seen, but the byre was so well cleaned that a golden apple would run from end to end of it, and raise no stain. In comes the giant, and he said,
Hast thou cleaned the byre, king's son?
I've cleaned it, says he.
Somebody cleaned it,
says the giant. You did not clean it, at all events, said the king's son.
Well, well, says the giant, since thou wert so active today, thou wilt get this time tomorrow to thatch the spire with birds down, from birds with no 2 feathers of one colour.
The king's son was on foot before the sun. He caught his bow and his quiver of arrows to kill the birds. He took to the moors, but if he did, the birds were not so easy to take. He was running after them till the sweat was blinding him. At about midday, who should come but Auburn Mary? You're exhausting yourself, king's son, says she.
I am,
says he. There fell but 2 of these blackbirds, and both of one colour. Come over and lay your weariness on this pretty hillock, said the giant's daughter.
It's I'm willing, says he.
He thought she would aid him this time too, And he sat down near her, and it was not long there till he fell asleep. When he woke, Auburn Mary was gone. He thought he would go back to the house, and he sees the byre thatched with feathers. When the giant came home, he said, "Hast thou thatched thy byre, king's son?" "I thatched it," says he. "Somebody thatched it," says the giant. "Hey, you did not thatch it," said the king's son. "Yes, yes," says the giant. "Now," says the giant, "there's a fir tree beside the loch down there. There's a magpie's nest in its top. The eggs that we'll find in the nest, I must have them for my first meal. Not one must be burst or broken, and there are 5 in the nest." Early in the morning, the king's son went to where the tree was. That tree was not hard to hit upon. Its match was not one in the whole wood. But from the foot of the first branch was 500 feet. The king's son was going all around the tree. She, who was always bringing help to him. Oh, she came, who was always bringing help to him. "Ah, you're losing the skin of your hands and feet." "Ah, I am," he says. "I'm no sooner up than down." "Well, this is no time for stopping," says the giant's daughter. "Now you must kill me. Strip the flesh from my bones. Take all the bones apart and use them as steps for climbing the tree. When you're climbing the tree, they'll stick to the glass as if they'd grown out of it. When you are climbing the tree, they will stick to the glass as they had grown out of it. But when you are coming down and have to put your foot on each one, they will drop into your hand when you touch them. Be sure to stand on each bone, leave none untouched. If you do, it'll stay behind. Put all my flesh into this clean cloth by the side of the spring at the roots of the tree. When you come to earth, arrange my bones together, put the flesh over them, and sprinkle it with water from the spring, and I shall be alive before you. But don't forget a bone of me on the tree." "How could I kill you?" asked the king's son, "after what you've done for me?" "If you won't obey, you and I are done for," said Auburn Mary. "You must climb the tree or we are lost, and to climb the tree you must do as I say." The king's son obeyed. He killed Auburn Mary, cut the flesh from her body, and unjointed the bones as she had told him. As he went up, the king's son put the bones of Auburn Mary's body against the side of the tree, using them as steps, till he came under the nest and stood on the last bone. Then he took the eggs, and coming down, put his foot on every bone, then took it with him, till he came to the last bone, which was so near the ground that he failed to touch it with his foot. He now placed all the bones of Auburn Mary in order at the side of the spring, put the flesh on them, sprinkled them with water from the spring. She rose up before him and said, "Didn't I tell you not to leave a bone of my body without stepping on it? Now I'm lame for life. I left my little finger on the tree without touching it, and I have but 9 fingers. Now, says she, go home with the eggs quickly, and you'll get to marry me tonight if you can know me. I and my 2 sisters will be arrayed in the same garments, and made like each other. But look at me when my father says, 'Go to thy wife, king's son,' and you'll see a hand without a little finger." He gave the eggs to the giant. "Yes, yes," said the giant. "Be making ready for your marriage." Then indeed there was a wedding, and it was a wedding. Giants and gentlemen, and the son of the king of the Green City was in the midst of them. They were married, and dancing began. That was a dance. Giant's house was shaken from top to bottom. But bedtime came, and the giant said, "It is time for thee to go rest, son of the king of Tethertown. Choose thy bride to take with thee from amidst those." She put out the hand, off of which the little finger was, and he caught her by the hand. "Thou hast aimed well this time too. But
There is no knowing, but we may meet thee another way,
said the giant. But to rest they went. Now, says she, sleep not, or else you're a dead man. You must fly quick, quick, or for certain my father will kill you. Out they went, and on the blue-grey filly on the stable they mounted. Stop a while, says she, and I'll play a trick to the old hero. She jumped in and cut an apple into 9 shares, and put 2 shares at the head of the bed, and 2 shares at the foot of the bed, and 2 shares at the door of the kitchen, and 2 shares at the big door, and 1 outside the house. The giant awoke and called,
Are you asleep?
Not yet, said the apple that was at the head of the bed. At the end of a while he called again. Not yet, said the apple that was at the foot of the bed. After a while he called this again.
Are you asleep?
Not yet, said the apple at the kitchen door. The giant called again. The apple was at the big door answered.
You are now going far from me,
says the giant. Not yet, said the apple that was outside the house.
You're flying,
says the giant. The giant jumped on his feet, and to the bed he went, but it was cold, empty.
My own daughter's tricks are trying me,
said the giant.
Here's after them,
says he. At the mouth of the day, the giant's daughter said that her father's breath was burning her back. Put your hand, quick, said she, in the ear of the grey filly, and whatever you find in it, throw behind us. There's a twig of an old slaw tree, says he. Throw it behind us, says he. No sooner did he that, than it was 20 miles of blackthorn wood, so thick that scarce a weasel could go through all of it. The giant came headlong, and there he's fleecing his head and his neck on the thorns.
My own daughter's tricks are here as before,
said the giant.
But if I had my own big axe and my wood knife here, I would not be long making my way through this.
He went home for the big axe and the wood knife, and he was not long on his journey. And he was the boy behind a big axe. He was not long making his way through the blackthorn.
I will leave the axe and the wood knife here until I return, says he.
If you leave him, said a hoodie that was in the tree. We'll steal him.
If you will do that, says the giant, I must take them home.
He turned home and left them at the house. After the heat of the day, the giant's daughter felt her father's breath burning her back. Put your finger in the filly's ear and throw behind whatever you can find in it. Got a splinter of grey stone, and in a twinkling there were 20 miles by breadth and by height, of great grey rock behind them. The giant came full pelt, but past the rock he could not go.
The tricks of my own daughter are at their hardest things that ever met me,
says the giant.
But if I had my lever and my mighty mattock, I would not be long in making my way through this rock also.
There was no help for it, but to turn the chase for them. And he was the boy to split the stones. He was not long in making a road through the rock.
I will leave the tools here, and I will return no more.
If you leave him, says the hoodie. You will steal him.
Do that if you will. There is no time to go back.
At the breaking of the wash, the giant's daughter said she felt her father's breath burn in her back. Look in the filly's ear, king's son, else we're lost. He did so, and it was a bladder of water that was in her ear this time. He threw it behind him, and there was a freshwater loch, 20 miles in length and breadth, behind them. The giant came on, but with the speed he had on him. He was in the middle of the loch, and he went under, and he rose no more. The next day the young companions were in sight of the father's house. Now, says she, my father is drowned, and he won't trouble us any more. But before we go further, says she, go to your father's house and tell you have the likes of me, but let neither man nor creature kiss you, for if you do, you will not remember that you've ever seen me. Everyone he met gave him welcome and luck, and he charged his father and mother not to kiss him. But, as mishap was to be, an old greyhound was indoors, and she knew him, and jumped up to his mouth, and after that, he did not remember the giant's daughter. She was sitting at the well side as he left her, but the king's son was not coming. In the mouth of night she climbed up onto a tree of oak that was beside the well, and she lay in the fork of the tree all night. A shoemaker had a house near the well, and about midday on the morrow the shoemaker asked his wife to go for a drink for him out to the well. The shoemaker reached the well, and when she saw the shadow of her, it was in the tree. Thinking it was her own shadow, she never thought till now she was so handsome. She gave a cast to the dish that was in her hand. The dish was broken on the ground, and she took herself into the house without vessel or water. Oh, where's the water, wife? Says the shoemaker. You shambling, contemptible old carle, without grace, I've stayed too long, your water and wood thrall. I think, wife, you've gone crazy. Go, you daughter, quickly, and fetch a drink for your father. His daughter went, and in the same way so it happened to her. She never thought so until now that she was so lovable, and she took herself home. Up with the drink. You homespun shoe carle, you think I'm fit to be your thrall. The poor shoemaker thought that they had taken a turn in their understandings. He went himself to the well. He saw the shadow of the maiden in the well and looked up to the tree, and he sees the finest woman he ever saw. Your seat's wavering, but your face is fair, says the shoemaker. Come down. There's need of you for a short while at my house. The shoemaker understood that this was the shadow that had driven people mad. The shoemaker took her to his house, and said that he had but a poor bothy, and that she could get all the share that was in it. One day the shoemaker had shoes ready. On that very day the king's son was to be married. The shoemaker was going to the castle with the shoes of the young people, and the girl said to the shoemaker, I would like to get a sight of the king's son before he marries. Come with me, says the shoemaker. I am well acquainted with the servants of the castle, and you shall get a sight of the king's son in all the company. And when the gentles saw the pretty woman that was there, they took her to the wedding room, and they filled her a glass of wine. When she was going to drink what was in it, a flame went up out of the glass, and a golden pigeon and a silver pigeon sprang out. They were flying about when 3 grains of barley fell on the floor. The silver pigeon sprung and ate that up. Says the golden pigeon to him, If you remembered when I cleared the byre, you'd not eat that without giving me a share. Again there fell 3 other grains of barley, and silver pigeon sprung and ate that up as before. If you remember when I thatched that byre, you would not eat that without giving me my share, says the golden pigeon. 3 other grains fell, and the silver pigeon sprung and ate that up. If you remember when I harried the magpie's nest, you would not eat that without giving me my share, says the golden pigeon. I lost my little finger bringing it down, and I want it still. The king's son minded, and he knew who it was that was before him. Well, said the king's son to the guests at the feast, I was a little younger than I am now. I lost the key of a casket that I had. I had a new key made, but after that it was brought to me and I found the old one. Now I'll leave it to anyone here to tell me what I am to do. Which of the keys should I keep? My advice to you, says one of the guests, is to keep the old key, for it fits the lock better and you're more used to it. Then the king's son stood up and said, I thank you for your wise advice and an honest word. This is my bride, the daughter of a giant who saved my life at the risk of her own. I'll have her and no other woman. So the king's son married Auburn Mary, and the wedding lasted long and all were happy. But all I got was butter on a live coal poured in a basket, and they sent me for water to the stream, and the paper shoes came to an end. It was a fun story. I have wind in me for one more. One more. I mean, we can't go without mentioning the leprechauns. Oh, it's a poem. Alright, two more. This one's from William Allingham, the Leprechaun, or Fairy Shoemaker. Little cowboy, what have you heard upon the lonely rath's green mould? On the plaintive yellow bird, sighing in sultry fields around? Cherry, 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 chee! Only the grasshopper and the bee. Tip-tap, rip-rap, tick-a-tack-too! Scarlet leather sewn together, this'll make a shoe. Left, right, pull it tight, summer days are warm. Underground in winter, laughing at the storm. Lay your ear close to the hill. Do you not catch a tiny clamour? Busy click an elfin hammer, voice a leprechaun singing shrill, as he merrily plies his trade. He is a span and a quarter in height. Get him in sight, hold him tight, and you're a made man. You watch your cattle the summer day, sup on potatoes, sleep in the hay. How'd you like to roll in your carriage, look for a duchess' daughter in marriage? Seize the shoemaker, then you may. Big boots a hunting, sandals in the hall. White for a wedding feast, pink for a ball. This way, that way, so we make a shoe. Getting rich every stitch, tick-a-tack-too. 9 and 90 treasure crocks, this keen miser fairy hath. Hid in mountains, wood and rocks, rune and round tower, crave and wrath. And where the comrades build from times of old, guarded by him, each of them filled with a brim of gold. I caught him at work one day myself, in the castle ditch where foxglove grows. A wrinkled, wizened, and bearded elf, spectacles stuck on his pointed nose, silver buckles to his shoe, leather apron, shoe in his lap. Rip-rap, tip-tap, tick-a-tack-too. A grasshopper on my cap, away the moth flew. Buskins for a Peri prince, brogs for a son. Pay me well when the job's done. The rogue was mine beyond a doubt. I stared at him, he stared at me. Servant, sir, humph, he says, and pulled a snuff box out. He took a long pinch, looked better pleased. The queer little leprechaun offered the box with a whimsical grace. Poof, he flung the dust in my face, and while I sneezed, was gone. That was funny. I enjoyed that. Is there another? That's the last of it. Okay. Got one more left in there. We'll do the jackdaw. Oh god, no, this looks long as hell. I can't tell where it ends. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, this is not nearly as long as I thought it was. Okay. Here we go. This is the jackdaw. Tom Moore was a linen draper in Sackville Street. His father, when he died, left him an affluent fortune and a shop of excellent trade. As he was standing at his door one day, a countryman came up to him with a nest of jackdaws, and accosting him says, "Master, will you buy a nest of daws?" "No, I don't want any." "Master," replied the man, "I will sell them all cheap. I'll have a whole nest for 9p." "I don't want 'em," answered Tom Moore, "so go about your business." As the man was walking away, one of the daws popped out his head and cried, "Milk, milk!" "Ah, damn it," says Tom Moore. "That bird knows my name. Hello, countryman. What'll you take for the bird?" "Actually, you shall have him for 3p." Tom Moore bought him, had a cage made, and hung him up by the shop. And the journeyman took much notice of the bird, and would frequently tap at the bottom of the cage and say, "Who are you? Who are you?" "Tom Moore of Sackville Street." In a short time, the jackdaw learned these words, and if he wanted victuals or water, he would strike his bill against the cage, turn up the white of his eyes, cock his head, and cried, "Who are you? Who are you? Tom Moore of Sackville Street." Tom Moore was fond of gaming, and often lost large sums of money, finding his business neglected in his absence. He had a small hazard table set up in one corner of his dining room, and invited a party of his friends to play at it. The jackdaw had by this time become familiar. His cage was left open, and he hopped to every part of the house. Sometimes he got into the dining room where the gentlemen were to play, and one of them being a constant winner, others would say, "Damn it, how he nicks him." The bird learned these words, and also adding to the former, would call, "Who are you? Who are you? Tom Moore of Sackville Street. Damn how he nicks him." Tom Moore, from those repeated losses and neglect of business, failed in trade and became a prisoner in the Fleet. He took his bird with him, and on the master's side, supported by friends in a decent manner, they would sometimes ask, "What brought you here?" When he used to lift up his hands and say, "Bad company, by God." The bird learned this likewise, and at the end of the former words would say, "What brought you here? Bad company, by God." Some of Thomas Moore's friends died, others went abroad, and by degrees he was totally deserted, and removed to the common side of the prison. The jail distemper soon attacked him, and in the last stage of 8, lying on the straw bed, the poor bird had been for 2 days without food or water, came to his feet, and striking his bill on the floor, calls out, "Who are you? Tom Moore of Sackville Street. Damn it, how he nicked him. Damn it, how he nicked him. What brought you here? Bad company, by God. Bad company, by God." Tom Moore, who attended to the bird, was struck with his words, and reflecting on himself, cried out, "Good God, what a situation I am reduced. My father, when he died, left me a good fortune and established trade. I've spent my fortune, ruined my business, and now I'm dying in a loathsome jail. And to complete all, keeping that poor thing confined without support. I'll endeavour to do one piece of justice before I die by setting him at liberty." He made a struggle to crawl from his straw bed, opened the casement, and out flew the bird. A flight of jackdaws from the temple were going over the jail, and Tom Moore's bird mixed among them. The gardener was then lying flat in the temple gardens, and as often as he placed them in the day, the jackdaws pulled them up by night. They got a gun and attempted to shoot some of them, but being cunning birds, they always placed one as watch on the stump of a hollow tree, who, as soon as the gun was levelled, cried, "Mark!" and away they flew. The gardeners were advised to get a net, and at the first night was spread they caught 15. Tom Moore's bird was among them. One of the men took the net into a garret of an uninhabited house, fastens the doors and the windows, and turns the bird loose. "Now," says he, "you black rascals, I'll be avenged of you. Taking hold of the first hand, he twists her neck, and throwing him down, cries, "There goes one." Tom Moore's bird, who had hopped onto a beam in one corner of the room unobserved, as the man holds the second, calls out, "Damn it, how he nixed him!" The man, alarmed, cries, "Sure, I've heard a voice, but the house is uninhabited, and the door's fast. It could only be my imagination." On laying hold of the third, twisting his neck, Tom's bird says again, "Damn it, how he nixed him!" The man dropped the bird in his hand, returning to where the voice came from. Seeing the other with his mouth open, cries out, "Who are you?" To which the bird answers, "Tom Moore of Sackville Street! Tom Moore of Sackville Street!" "Ah, the devil you are! And what brought you here?" Tom Moore's bird, lifting up his pinions, answered, "Bad company, begone! Bad company, begone!" The fellow, frightened almost out of his wits, opened the door, ran down the stairs, and out of the house, followed by all the birds, who by this means regained their liberty. It's a somewhat sad story. Finish it out. With that. Yeah, that was like an hour and a half of good stories. Maybe there's a short one I can squeak in. Maybe. Nothing's jumping out at me, but I can read a little bit about the Wren. Oh, the Wren is a trickster. Oh, that fits with our Wren too. Hee hee hee. Yeah, the Wren is apparently the king of all birds. Tale from the Brothers Grimm. Birds concluded they need a king. They decided to hold a contest for the king. Oh, interesting. There's a Wren Day. Although known as Wren's Day, Day of the Wren or Hunt of the Wren. Irish, La'an, Drawlin. Is an Irish celebration held on the 26th of December, St. Stephen's Day, in a number of countries across Europe. Hunting a wren. Now a fake wren, but previously a real one. And putting it on top of a decorated pole. Then the crowds of mummers or straw boys celebrate the wren. They're dressing up in masks, straw suits, and colorful motley clothing. They form music bands and parade through the towns and villages. Hunt of the Wren on the Isle of Man. The origin may be from Samhain. Celtic mythology considered the wren a symbol of the past year. This suggests Druidic rituals. Ancient Enchantress, the Queen of Fairies. Beautiful Halloween. She's confronted, but turned into a wren and escaped. She's banished from the island, but returns once a year when she's hunted. the Ren is a trickster. Interesting. Very interesting. Oh wait, no, that's not what I meant. Oh. Harbinger of spring and rebirth. Arts because of its an association with poets, songwriters. Okay. Celtic meanings. Active little bird. Activity, vibrancy, alertness, and efficiency. Cool. Huh. Creative approach to everything. Nothing seems burdensome. They love sharing their success with others. I don't know if I believe that. Like, I don't know if that's actually a Celtic thing. I'd like to do more reading on that. But certainly fits with my run. That will have to do it for now, though, because I am tired. I am so tired. But I'm glad I could give you a little Irish cheer tonight. And as always, in the meantime... Oh, sorry, Thunder Kitty, hello. In the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions, do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden, and I will see all of you wonderful people. Ah, poop. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. There's 2 hours of VODs. There's 2 hours of VOD, though. It's nothing by Irish Stories in honor of St. Patrick's Day. But yeah, I'm tired. 'Twas a long day, for sure. And tomorrow is likely to be longer. But I'll be back. You shan't need to worry about me. You shan't need to worry about me. But in the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions, do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Take care, guys, and I hope you enjoy it. And whatever's in your cup, be it water or something spicier. Stay safe.